Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of TBR, and I'm George Binns. And as you probably guessed, it's election season, and there are 5 candidates running for 3 seats as City Councilor at Large. And we have with us this evening Julie Flowers, who is the current president of the City Council, who is running for re-election. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, George. Thanks for having me back. It's always nice to see you.
So, you're happy with the jobs? You want to do some more? What do you want to do different this time? Anything?
Yeah, I thank you. I appreciate that. I definitely feel like my role as a city councilor at large, which I'm running for, this would be running for a 5th term.
Yeah.
I'm in my 4th term right now. I feel like it really has been a real positive. I think I have felt like I've gotten to really grow in the role, understand the role. This is my 2nd term as president of the City Council. And so I've had a chance, I think, to really grow in my understanding of not just what an at-large city councilor can do, but how the council can really effectively be another voice, a sort of collective voice, but also 9 individuals in the city, and how we can make sure that we're reflecting back what we're hearing from our constituents. So I'm looking forward, hopefully, to that 5th term, to earning voters' trust again. And the thing that I've really worked on in the past 2 terms, but especially this term, just really trying to help with clear communication coming from the City Council and really trying to make those agendas, how our meetings come together, what's happening at a meeting, and even how we're working our way through a meeting, really user-friendly is what I like to say. But of course, government is really for the people that it represents. And so sometimes I know it can feel a little difficult. It feels a little obtuse how agendas bounce around, or why a public hearing suddenly opens, then recesses, then moves. So I really tried to work to make those things accessible to people in Beverly, and that's something I'd like to really continue and to bring more people in.
One of the things that I think came up in this last year, several things came up, was the surprise that the City Council got over the library. The AC overhaul was pegged at $3 million and change, and the city went off and thought about it and came back and said, no, it's going to be $18 million. We're going to redo bunches of other things. So this kind of a sticker shock, I think, was a turning point with the City Council in terms of how do you work with a strong mayor City Council operation? And how do we get into this, or how do we get out of it?
Yeah, you're referencing, of course, our city charter that sets up this sort of strong mayor form of government. And I think you're right to point to the library as an example of, I think, a pitfall that can happen where, I'm not saying that the library project would have necessarily passed if we had been getting more regular updates. I can't say that all of the councilors would have voted one way or the other. I do think you're correct that there were changes and evolutions in the project that were happening after we heard that initial projection to look at the project. And that included, of course, work that needed to be done on the envelope as a whole, ADA compliant work that's triggered by a certain size project. But you're absolutely right that the fact that the council sort of hadn't gotten regular updates to help us, and then in turn to help us help the public understand how it got from point A to point B, I think was a challenge. So one of the things that this council together, the 9 of us, have really worked hard to do is to express our desire as a council to have the mayor and his staff come from more regular quarterly updates on those kind of big projects. We, of course, get a capital plan every year for the city. Sometimes the capital plan can be more broad brush strokes, and you can understand why that would happen, because until you really start to drill down and do a study on a particular project, you can't be sure, the administration can't be sure, and I don't fault them for that, what construction costs will be at the time, what labor costs will be. Those things are variables. Yeah. So once we get into the scope of a project, one of the things that we've really worked hard as a council to express to the administration is that we would like these regular updates, quarterly updates, to let us know, for example, is a project like the library evolving in a way that we should have some of these updates? And of course, any updates that come to the council at a public meeting are really updates for the public because
yeah.
so that's our desire is not just to have them for counselors, but to have them so the public can hear. I think often communication and clear communication can be one of the biggest things that can help an entire municipality to feel like we're able to move along through difficult projects or difficult financial times, because I often think people can understand when projects might change or scope might change, why something that made sense may or may not make sense any longer. But when things don't appear to be clear and there's not clear communication along the way, that's when I think people feel frustrated, and I can understand why. So we've really worked to put in place this process of regular updates. We've had 2 of those from the mayor, and those really have been very helpful to have these more regular check-ins. Or there's been a few times the mayor has brought other department heads, other staff, who might have more of a hands-on,
Yeah.
closer touch on a project. That's also very helpful to really get to hear with regularity. So that's one way I think the council can offer that balance, to just say, we understand that the mayor's office, the administration, has a role to play, and one way that we see the council having a role to play is by expressing this desire to have information reported in publicly with more regularity, and that's for the benefit of the public.
Well, I think that you're making a valid point that eventually whatever you hear at the council has to go to the taxpayers.
Yes.
Because when the real estate tax goes up, where did it go is an obvious question. And just because, well, we needed the extra money for something or other, does not give people much confidence that things are under control. And I know what you're saying is, because we've gone through this with the 2 bridges. All of a sudden you get oh, by the way, you can't do this and you can't do that, but we need to do this. And that's, I think, one of the pitfalls of the way government in general is run, is there are too many entities that have veto power over bits and pieces of it. And it's challenging. And flying in the dark is really challenging. At least if you see where you're going and know why you're going there, I think that helps smooth out the path, and when you'd have to dig into your wallet and peel out a couple more,
Yes.
yeah, kind of things. So,
Well, yes, I agree with you, and I think one other thing you and I have talked about, but to that end, we're about to enter into budget season as a municipality,
Yeah.
and so folks will see the city council has a series of budget meetings where we'll be meeting with department heads, so people can follow that to see some of what's happening with the proposed FY26 budget. But we also, as a council, had been asking and working with the administration for several years now to get a more transparent, public-facing budget document. So what we used to have as a city, nothing wrong with it from a functional point of view. It was really the printouts from the munis system, the budgeting system, and came in a big binder. And so city councilors would be going through it line by line in those meetings. And again, functionally that worked fine. That's really hard if you're someone at home trying to follow, to be following people reading, a line item number and to follow the conversation. So last year, the city began using this ClearGov tool, which is available through the website. I think you said you had accessed it once.
Yeah.
And it allows people to look at both the pieces of the budget in line items, sort of a more standard accounting form, or to change the view. So if someone is interested in seeing it in a more visual representation, there's different graphs that you can ask it to pull up. Department heads submit sort of an overarching summary for their department. So if reading sort of the narrative of what's happening is helpful for people to get understanding, that's there. So I think that's another way where the council has been a positive voice working with the administration to say, how can we make the budget process more accessible and transparent for people? Because you're right, that's a direct impact to everybody who lives in Beverly. When the budget comes together, taxpayers' money is what helps to fund those programs and services.
yeah, and I think this is a citywide message, because one of the things that I'm concerned about is coming out of the teacher negotiations was some talk of, well, we need an override. And that's nice. What are you going to do with the money? And how is it going to be spent? And I think you can go online to better, was it U.S. News and World Report, NISH, there's several other of these sources to get an evaluation of how is Beverly school system doing. And it's not the greatest. Some challenges in there. And I think just to say that we need more money, how is it going to impact that? And what's the result going to be? And I think this is the missing piece. And I think it all rolls back into this whole concept of the charter where we have a, quote, strong mayor and a relatively weak city council. So it's hard to come up with, and that, I think, is the challenge that you guys are facing of how do you get your input into the city without just saying, no, we're not going to vote on it. Cut out that line item. I mean, that gets to be too crude and rude, and it doesn't solve anything. So I think what I'd like to understand better is, how can the city council get more input into the process early enough to make a difference without having to get to the end of the road and have a yay or nay?
Yes. One of the places where we do have sort of this earlier access, and it's a little later than usual this year, but it's coming up, so I wanted to mention it, especially if folks are interested, is that the charter prescribes before the budget process really begins, the school committee, and you're right to reference the fact that schools are 50% of our budget, and with good reason. It's
it's very important.
Many students, huge number of employees. We have many talented educators and school leaders, and so we've got this really incredible resource that we need to steward well for the benefit of, as you said, our students, our community. So there is a prescribed meeting, a joint meeting of the school committee and the city council as the budget process is getting underway, and a big piece of that is because otherwise the two groups do meet separately. School committees are empowered in Massachusetts, and rightly so, to really have ownership of that piece of the budget. I know you know that really well from your time. And so I think this is an important conversation back and forth, because for city councilors, it allows us to hear upfront more about what the school administration, superintendent's office, and school committee are thinking, anticipating, and planning ahead of the budget process, to be able to ask some questions and to have some input there. And vice versa, the school committee gets an update from the city's finance director and budget analysts. And so that's coming up on Wednesday, May 7th, and it will be at the Beverly High School Library at 6:30 p.m. It will be on BevCam.
Yep.
So if folks are interested, that's a sort of first look. And then the school committee budget process sort of goes ahead of the, as you referenced, ahead of the sort of final budget that the city council gets.
Yeah.
So if people are interested in getting their voices in the mix, that's going to be a great opportunity for that.
Well, that brings up another interesting challenge that we're going to have a new superintendent.
Yes.
He's already accepted the position. And is he going to have input to this budget? Is he going to be there?
That's a question I actually don't have an answer to.
No, I think, but this
it's
is
a
the kind
question,
of thing I would
yes.
be concerned about. That, Sue Chirotech's done a good job, and she's probably going to put together a good budget, or she's going to have her staff put together a good budget that is accurate and
Yes.
answers a bunch of things. The mayor has expressed his concern with the new superintendent, so I'm not sure how smooth that's going to be. So I, for one, would like to know what the new superintendent thinks of this budget that he's going to have to manage.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I think it's one that I'll be asking as well, and I think we'll get a clearer sense, certainly May 7th and following. But you are correct that it's a transitional time for our schools and consequently, of course, in our city.
Yeah, so I mean, this is part of the process of making things go smoothly, not just say, okay, the day you walk, oh, by the way, this is your budget, manage this. And that gets to be somewhat of a rough way to start a business. So I think there's bunches of these issues that are tied around how do we coordinate between the various entities that the city
Yes.
has. And it's going to be interesting. I wish you luck.
Thank you. Thank you. I think you're right to say that communication among different branches of city government, among these different entities, and then the city to folks who live in Beverly, that has to be a huge priority for all of us, because in all times, but I think especially in transitional moments, we want to move forward successfully for our schools, for our community, and I think you're right to say to do that we need to build in some intentional steps forward so that we can make that happen.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of all the different projects that are sort of hanging. They've been talking, we, the city, have been talking about a bridge over 128 to Dunham Road for 10, 15 years. I don't know where that is. And it's just been talk. And similarly, we're now getting through the first 5-year hiatus on Folly Hill, and something needs to be done there. And I was watching a YouTube video the other day, and they got into this issue about all these different entities that have essentially veto power over some piece of the action. And the challenge of trying to put some of these programs together when you have to go through all these wickets and they never get there from here. And by the time you get over here, they change their mind over there, and kind of thing. So I guess the question is, as president of the city council and as a city councilor at large, how do you get to the point where you can start to influence some of what's going on and smooth out the operation so there's none of these sticker shocks?
I think some of that piece of that puzzle is working towards or through some of the mechanisms that we've started to put in place, having these more regular public updates and check-ins from the administration to the city council. I think another piece of it is continuing to foster strong relationships with our partners at the state government level and at the federal level as well. But thinking about the Hall-Whitaker Bridge as an example, or the Kernwood Bridge, you're right to say that that's an example, and I think Beverly residents, particularly in Ward 1 in Ryleside, have seen in real time what you just talked about, where you've got lots of different agencies at state and federal levels who own a piece of the permitting process, who own a piece of the decision making. Yeah. And so it's really been incumbent on city leaders to really continue to foster strong relationships at the state and with federal partners so that we can advocate for what the city needs and try to get help, as you said, smoothing over some of those sort of longer term or mismatched seeming processes that don't seem like they line up. And I do want to say, on the Hall-Whitaker Bridge, for example, we've been fortunate. Our former state rep, Jerry Paracella, State Senator Joan Lovely, they've worked really hard with us to try to help advocate and move that process forward. I know it doesn't feel fast. It's been a slow process. But to speed it up as much as possible to try to get some of those agencies together in the same place. And I do want to give credit to my Ward 1 colleague, Todd Rotundo. That's his ward, as you know, and Todd's worked really hard to be in those conversations, to be at the table, to really advocate for however we can bring these different organizations and entities together so that the people who live in the most impacted parts of the city are not stuck waiting without communication or for as long. So I think that's an example, what I'm talking about there with Todd really working to bring people into one place on that conversation is an example of how I see city councilors able to exercise some influence, some advocacy, and really try to speak a voice into the conversation that's in the best interest of residents. What are we hearing? What are we seeing? And how do we think we can bring all of the parties together to work out a solution?
Yeah, and in Todd's case, because he is so active, involved with them, when he comes back from one of those meetings, he may not bring big news, but he brings the straight story.
Yes, and that's that communication piece.
As well as, this is why we're having a problem. It's this agency that's doing this to that one, and so forth. And there's a lot of these things that get beyond what the city can control directly.
Yes.
And one of the ones that's going to come up is, if it hasn't already, is if you want to develop Folly Hill, you need to get access to 128 in both directions.
Yes.
And don't see much happening on that activity. And this gets into, I guess, the issue that the city would like to develop various properties that we have for, in the case of Folly Hill, for residents. For Dunham Road, it's to expand the business opportunities that I guess Cummings is doing one of the major
Yes.
developments along that string.
Yes, that's right.
So that it's nice to develop that area, but the more developed it becomes, the traffic hazard coming out of Dunham Road to,
Yeah.
and just the noise and confusion. It's a residential neighborhood they're going through.
Yes.
So these kind of problems, yeah, they get involved with the state, but the city has to initiate some reasonable plan that the state can buy into. And that takes a lot of effort. And I don't know where you go to make this happen. And the other one recently surprised me was cell signaling was expanding in Manchester.
Mm-hmm.
You know, okay, I understand the president of cell signaling lives in Manchester, wants to take care of his hometown, but at the same time, to me, that sounds like an opportunity for more business development, which,
Yes.
from a mercenary point of view, that's more tax money. And at the same time, it's more jobs for local Beverly residents. So what I'm missing, I guess, is, and probably you are too, is who's working on this and what have they accomplished or what have they found?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of updates on cell
No,
signaling, so that's a great point. I did want to mention, since I was updating a little bit on the work in Ward 1, I think you're exactly right that Dunham Road, the traffic in that residential neighborhood is really difficult. And so our Ward 5 counselor, my Ward 5 colleague Kathleen Feldman, similarly has been involved in many conversations trying to bring different organizations, trying to get the state conversation together. And that project is moving forward. It has to sort of work its way along in the state's priority list as well. But I do think we're going to see positive movement to alleviate some of that pressure on Dunham Road. And so again, that's what I think city councilors can really dig in and be those voices of advocacy to try to bring the concerns of residents in different parts of our community forward and really speak for them. I think that's a big part of our role.
So this is basically why you're going to run again, huh?
That's a big piece of it, yeah, getting to hear what's happening with people and speak for them. So thank you to the people of Beverly. Thank you for putting your trust in me for these past 4 terms, almost 8 years. It has been a true honor and a privilege to serve as one of your at-large city councilors. At-large councilors represent the whole of Beverly, so that means any ward you live in, your at-large councilor works for you, and you have the opportunity to vote for an at-large councilor. George and I talked about what a time of transition this is in our community. We know that we have some difficult fiscal years ahead, difficult budgeting years ahead. That's been a frank and honest conversation that we've been having as a community, as a city, and we do know that there's just financial uncertainty that is broader than Beverly that's happening right now, that many municipalities are experiencing, states are experiencing. And so in this time of transition, when we know we're going to have to dig in and really do some hard work together, but I believe also some good work together, I believe that having a trusted and tried leader on the city council, which I hope I've been for you and can continue to be, is a positive, and someone who can lead with information, with the knowledge, with the experience, but also with a sense of real optimism. And I really do have a sense of optimism for us as a community. I appreciate all that Beverly is. I think together we bring an incredible wealth of opinions and voices, gifts, talents, and strengths. It doesn't mean that we're not without our challenges as a community, but I look around and think about how many things we have to bring to the table collectively. And so I believe that sense of optimism that I can bring, along with everything that I've learned over the past 8 years, my absolute commitment to hear what's happening for you, to hear what's happening in your life, on your street, in what your story is, and then think about how the City Council, how I can, and how my colleagues can use tools at our disposal or use tools at the city's disposal to meet those needs, solve those problems, and if we can't, get back to you with the real and honest answers about what's going on, what the setbacks are, and what the steps ahead can be so that we can work together to continue to build a better future for our community. I commit to you that I will continue to lead in such a way that I will hear from you, respond. It's a point of pride for me that I try to really make sure that I get back to constituents when I hear from you. I think you deserve that, and put in the hard work for you. So I would be incredibly honored. You'll see me coming around. We're still at the point that we're getting nomination papers in, so you'll see me in your neighborhoods, knocking on doors, asking for signatures to fill out the nomination papers to earn a spot on the ballot. And after that, I would be extremely honored and pleased to meet you, hear your concerns. Once a month, I'm at the Senior Center doing community drop-in hours, and that's the first Monday of every month at 10 a.m. I love to have people come by and share with me what's happening for you and how I might be able to help, or just hear some updates on what's happening in your neighborhood in Beverly, the positive and the challenges. And so I commit to you that I'll continue to be the kind of leader that's accessible, open. We'll try to communicate effectively and strongly. We'll try to continue to lead City Council meetings in a way that you feel are accessible, invite you in, and make it easy for you to follow along and get your voice heard in the mix. That's very important to me. So I would be honored to earn one of your 3 votes for at-large City Councilor when we come around to that time in November. And thank you so much. Thanks for the past 8 years of support and trust as well. And thank you, George, for having me.
No, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Glad to have you. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in this evening. And we will have more of these discussions as we go along. And as I mentioned, my email address is at the head of the credits and at the tail end. So if you've got a comment, please let me know. And if you have a longer statement to make, there's room for you here at the table. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you later.